Good afternoon to everyone and welcome to today's virtual design review panel meeting. This is the first item on the agenda. I am Joe Bordoloni, host of this meeting, but panel member David Clucio will be the chair. In addition to the panel members, we have the applicant team, city staff, members of the public, and the media observing this meeting. Members of the public are welcome to observe the meeting only. This session is being recorded and will be uploaded to the DRP webpage. Just a reminder to please keep your microphones muted if you are not speaking. Thank you, David, and begin the meeting.
Okay, good afternoon and welcome everyone. Joe, can you please confirm that this session is being recorded?
It is.
And are there any changes in the agenda today?
There are not, no.
I'm going to ask the panel members if they have any conflicts of interest, and I'll assume that silence means that there are no conflicts. And then I'll turn it over to, well, the first item on the agenda today is the review of 405 Main Street West. The lead planner on the file is Jennifer Allen. Good afternoon, Jennifer. We are ready for your presentation. Please keep the presentation under 10 minutes.
Good afternoon. Thank you, David. So I'm going to share my screen. The presentation. All right. Well, hi everyone. My name is Jennifer Allen. I'm a planner 2 on the urban team, and I will be presenting the proposal for 405 Main Street West. So the proposal is to construct a new 7-story multiple dwelling building containing 97 residential dwelling units. 20 parking spaces will be provided within 1 level of underground parking for the proposal, and it will be accessed from Jackson Street West. A total of 63 long-term bicycle parking spaces and 10 short-term bicycle parking spaces are proposed on site. So the subject lands are comprised of 405 Main Street West, which contains a existing restaurant building and a surface parking area at the rear, as well as 404 Jackson Street West, which contains a single-family dwelling. So the subject lands are a through lot with a frontage onto Main Street West and Jackson Street West, and the lands are located just west of Poulette Street South and Strathcona, and just south of Strathcona Avenue South. So this is the view of the subject lands looking south from Main Street West. This is the view of the rear of the subject lands, the surface parking area. This is the view of the subject lands looking north from Jackson Street West. This is the view of the subject property and the surrounding area looking east on Main Street West. This is a view of the vacant restaurant building adjacent to the subject lands, and this is looking southwest on Main Street West. This restaurant is currently under the site plan process to be redeveloped as a 6-story multiple dwelling. This is the view of the commercial building adjacent to the subject lands looking southwest from the intersection of Main Street West and Poulette Street South, as well as the existing semi-detached dwellings on the other side of Poulette Street looking south on Main Street West. Then this is the view of Strathcona Avenue South, which is directly north of the subject property on the residential area to the north, as well as the view of Jackson Street West looking west, which has the low-rise residential area to the rear of the subject property. And this is another view of the residential buildings along the south side of Jackson Street West. So this is the proposed site plan and the underground parking plan and the ground floor plan. And then this is the north elevation, which shows the rendering of the proposed 6-story building at 415 Main Street West, which is the former restaurant building shown in the previous pictures. And then this is the south elevation, which shows renderings of the existing low-rise dwellings along Jackson Street South, or Jackson Street West, sorry. This is the west elevation and the east elevation. And then this is a rendering which shows the surrounding uses as well. So the subject property is identified as a primary corridor on Schedule E of the Urban Hamilton Official Plan, and it is designated as mixed-use medium density on Schedule E1 of the Urban Hamilton Official Plan. So a primary corridor shall link two or more nodes, major activity centers, or employment areas. It shall function as a vital part of the surrounding neighborhood and serve as a central focal point. It shall be the location for a range of higher density land uses along the corridor. The mixed-use medium density designation shall promote the continuation of pedestrian-oriented mixed-use areas. It shall serve as a focus for the community, creating a sense of place. It shall evolve over time into a compact mixed-use people places where people can live, work, and shop. And residential development in these areas shall enhance the function as transit supportive nodes and corridors. Some urban design policies outlined in the Urban Hamilton Official Plan are respecting existing character development patterns, built form, and landscapes, promoting quality design consistent with the locale and surrounding environment, contributing to the character and ambiance of the community through appropriate design and streetscapes and amenity areas, and complementing existing massing patterns, rhythm, character, color, and surrounding context. So the subject lands are located within the Strathcona Secondary Plan. The subject lands are designated as mixed use medium density within the Special Policy Area B. And a multiple dwelling is permitted within this designation up to 10 stories, subject to meeting or demonstrating compliance for the relevant secondary plan policies with respect to transition and scale and impact on the surrounding area. So some of the major policy themes and urban design policies for the Strathcona Secondary Plan include protecting and enhancing stable residential areas and ensuring compatibility between areas of different land use or development intensity, supporting a mix of housing types and tenures that meets the housing needs of residents throughout their life cycles and provides opportunities for residents to remain within the community. Encouraging design that promotes pedestrian walkability and physical activity, social interaction, and enhanced public gathering spaces. Encouraging innovative building and site development which contributes to the physical environment of the community and enhances the desirability of Strathcona as a place to live, work, and play. And lastly, promoting design variety within streetscapes. This is a image of the zoning boundaries. So 405 Main Street West is zoned mixed use medium density, C5 298 zone, which permits a multiple dwelling. And the minimum facade height of 7.5 meters is required along a street in this zone, and a maximum building height of 22 meters is permitted, subject to meeting any other regulations for step backs. And then 404 Jackson Street West is Zone D, D district within the former City of Hamilton zoning bylaw 6593. A multiple dwelling is not permitted within this zone. The applicant is just proposing this portion to be used as landscape area, but the zoning of this property will need to be addressed through the appropriate planning application. So the specific areas of discussion today would be, does the proposal represent compatible integration with the surrounding area in terms of use, scale, form, and character? Does the proposal complement and animate existing surroundings through building design and placement, as well as through placement of pedestrian amenities? And is the proposal massed to respect existing and planned street proportions? So that concludes my presentation. Thank you for listening.
Sorry, David, I think you're muted.
Sorry, I think it's the applicant's turn to present, and if they could keep it to within 10 minutes, that would be appreciated.
Thank you very much for the opportunity. I'm going to share my screen with an abbreviated version of our submission. Can people see the screen now?
Yes.
Okay. So thank you very much. I'm going to try to very specifically address the three questions that were asked, and we'll touch on a couple other items that we think are critical to the quality of the application. The first question is the project compatible with the surrounding area? We've spent a great deal of work page. There we are. We spent a great deal of effort in examining the site and also being inspired by the various guidelines that are in place. We found them to be actually quite helpful in the approach to the project. We believe in what's being proposed through the urban design policies, the Strathcona secondary plan and the citywide corridor planning principles. So in most regards, and we had a harder time finding areas where we didn't meet the guidelines than where we did, because we believe in the approach, and it's going to lead to quality built environment along Main Street. The question related to that was, does it complement and animate the existing surroundings? You can see that there currently the spaces, the stretch of Main Street is quite underdeveloped for these kind of properties. There are a couple, there's a new proposal to the west of us, and then of course the development on Locke Street are two examples of the newer types of projects. We think that with our proposal, we will do a nice job to create that urban wall along Main Street. I'll get into how we've animated the street in a moment. And we've also made a few gestures towards Jackson that we believe are kind of more intimate and residential in scale to help with that transition also. As far as how it's masked, I can go to this diagram is an interesting way to look at it. We kind of built up the massing relative to the two desires of the guidelines. So the first move was to simply place the building on the site with the required setbacks. The second move then was to create the continuous urban wall facade along Main Street. The third move was then to start to make the required and desired, we're well within the setback guidelines, along Jackson, to diminish the massing along Jackson and make it more compatible with the residences along that street. And then the third was to use effective landscaping to screen, buffer, and soften the zones along Jackson and along Main Street. If I can go to I'll go straight to the ground floor to address that issue about animating the street. What we've done in this project is, as you know, it's affordable and deep affordable rental accommodation. We really want to make this a very positive social environment for our tenants. And so we have carefully placed all of the required and desired amenities in places where we imagine they're going to have the most interaction The elevators are consciously placed near the front of the building, along with meeting rooms, the office, the mail room, a party room, a fitness area, and a business area, so that people will have these chance encounters and get to know each other. Even on the second floor, the laundry room, which is often a place where people would meet each other, is placed right outside of the elevators. So again, we're encouraging all of those chance encounters. On the site plan towards Jackson, you'll see that our client has purchased the land on 404, and the purpose of that was twofold, but primarily it's so that we have a very nice landscaped buffer to the residences to the west. And also it gives our tenants a nice place to relax and gather. In that area also, we show temporary bike facilities. We show, and then the lower tenants on that level get a small patio area that they can then engage with the people in that zone. I'd also like to point out, because a lot of attention was put onto the Jackson Street facade, knowing that may be quite sensitive and less sort of determined. It's less clear on what we're trying to achieve relative to Main Street with the animation. So we have underground parking, and we use the ramp as a buffer to the east. We knew that the ramp would result in a bit of an empty space relative to what we could accommodate on the west. And we are making an assumption that to the east, with that corner location, its ultimate development will probably be more dense than what might happen on the west. So therefore, we use the ramp as a buffer, and it let us use the green space to the west. Because of our positioning, almost due north-south, we get excellent sunlight into all of these spaces. There's a sun study obviously was done, and it works quite well. As far as the garbage goes, some of the guidelines are quite difficult to meet. There are ways of handling it, and I think that in our case, we are handling it with the most sensitivity. It will be private pickup because we don't have enough room on the site to obviously turn around a service vehicle. But that let us put in an enclosed garbage space. So you will never see a bin on the street. You'll never see an exposed bin. There will be no odors. There'll be no negative impact of that. And then as we go up the building, you'll notice on level 4, we also, as we step the building back, we are providing an amenity space as a terrace with some landscaping and a covered trellis, so that our guests, our tenants can gather there also. And it's got a very nice southern exposure. This drawing shows how we're within the required guidelines, and we're well within them. And that was something that we think works quite well. We hope other properties adhere to all of that, because we think it works quite well, particularly on Jackson, to help us break down the massing. And of course, we're excited by Main Street. We create an elevation. You'll notice we do the setback at 3 stories to align with what's being proposed at 415. And then we dropped it down on the east side to align with what's currently there. And then we don't know, obviously, what ultimately the development will be there, but we imagine that at 2 or 3 stories, this type of massing would align quite comfortably with what they would be proposing. You'll also notice on, as far as the building materials go, we are taking our references from the neighborhood. There's a lot of sort of early 20th century homes, predominantly in lighter brick tones. There's some lighter metals and other finishes. And then we're trying to add a little bit of pop of color to the project, so we don't just end up receding completely into gray. We think it's kind of nice that we make a nod towards downtown with those colors. Our colors are based on nature they start with greens and then work their way up to more bluish tones as we rise through the building. And they are here and there. It's not a polychromatic building. It has pops of color where we believe are adding to the effectiveness of it. And I guess to close out, one of the final comments that people have an interest in, there was the Sun studies, is on the sustainability issues. We're very aware of what's available both from a passive point of view and from an equipment selection or material point of view. We are pursuing, obviously, all of the passive goals. Our project is inherently has a small carbon footprint. We do not provide a car for every tenant. We are dense development on a transit-oriented street, and we'll therefore use less materials than others, and less car use will happen. As far as the system goes, our proposal now is that we will be very focused on electrical systems for heating and cooling. We won't have gas in the building. We are looking at hyper insulated enclosures to reduce the amount of energy being used. And then we'll be pursuing alternate energies as they become reasonable. As you can imagine, we are very focused on making this a high quality environment, but it has to be affordable for the tenants so that we can meet our goals, which is to bring a variety of tenant types to the neighborhood, meaning we are hoping we get from young people that are just out of school all the way through to an elderly tenant. And also we have a 20% mix of fully accessible units, meaning fully accessible handicap spaces, barrier-free spaces, both specifically you'll see in the kitchens and washrooms. I think that's what I'd like to close with. And obviously, if you have any questions.
Thank you very much for your presentation. At this time, I'll turn to the panel members if they have any items they need clarification on. Please just ask questions at this point. We'll give our feedback later. So the first one is Jennifer Sison.
So thanks, John, for your presentation. I have 3 questions, so I'll probably ask them one at a time to give you a better chance to respond. First of all, this is a mixed use lot. So I'm wondering if a commercial or a retail use was ever considered, particularly on the main street frontage. And if so, why wasn't it pursued?
I probably should let the client explain it. One reason it was not pursued is that we didn't feel we could get enough critical mass to make it effective. So we were not on a corner property, and with the number of amenities that we were looking to provide for our tenants, we couldn't get a large enough volume that would make it appealing to a significant retail tenant. And that's due to our limited frontage relative to our depth.
And I can add too, Main Street West is considered an area of change and for intensification. And per the Strathcona Urban Design Guidelines, Main Street West presents the most opportunity for primarily residential redevelopment with limited commercial uses at grade. So as the client's goal is for affordable housing, the mix-in of commercial wasn't really deemed a great opportunity for the site.
Thank you both. My second question was, it looks like there are some blank facades on the east and west faces on kind of the main street portion of the building. I was hoping you could give us a little bit more information about the design approach to these, why you chose to do blank walls on those sides.
Well, I would we'll call them simplified walls. They're simplified. We were looking at adding a lot more color to them, and we felt that when we added too much color, it created a look that made it look like affordable housing. And it's something that we are trying to avoid. We're trying to make this fit into the neighborhood really very nicely. And we don't want to look like we are dropping an affordable housing project into the space. So we carry the colors around the edges, and then in the middle, we simplified the facades. One item that could help us, but again, it's in the issue of being conscious to make sure that these are affordable. So we could be adding balconies or guards to doors, but then we run the risk. As far as energy efficiency goes, sustainability goes, that's a significant drawback. And as far as cost goes, it's a significant detriment. So, we are trying to do something that looks elegant between the two sort of dumbbell ends of the building, but it really is about trying to achieve the goals of the project without putting our resources where we believe they're the most impactful.
Thank you. And my final question was that you noted in your design brief that you have some raised planters, benches, and fencing that were meant to address the goal of public art. I was hoping you could expand on that a little bit about how those would address that goal.
What we don't know yet. I mean, I've done quite a bit of work with artists in that regard, and it's kind of the fun side of things, which we're not quite there. So when we have something like a raised planter with a screen, the back is a perfect example, and of course the front planter, it gives us a chance to work with them to create. We can create a lighting effect in there. We could have the screens laser cut and printed. We could tell a story. We've been working lately with a number of Indigenous artists. We would be very interested in having stories told on the street specifically about that location. So, until we get a little bit further, we hadn't developed that to that degree. We also have partners that will come to this project, and we want that art program to align with our partners. So they may have an area of interest, and then we can pursue it. So that was that. Yeah. So I apologize. It's not an answer. It's basically we have a placeholders.
Thanks very much. That's all my questions.
Yelena?
Sorry, it takes me forever to find that mute button. Thank you. Jennifer asked the questions I had.
Hoda, if you have any questions.
Hi, thank you, David, and thank you for the presentation. I have a question about the access from Jackson Street. It seems that there are more exit in the service area. I was wondering if the access is only for pedestrian along the pathway to go behind the staircases. Is that the access, like an entrance?
There is an access sorry, the question is, can the tenants get into the building from Jackson?
Yes.
Yes. Yeah. So there's a back end. There's basically at the back, they would go through a gate. That's where the temporary bicycle parking is. And then if you go around the corner to the right, which is towards where the garbage area would be, there's a corridor, an entrance there that takes you either down or up. So there's a corridor entrance at the back. That's correct.
Okay, I see that. Again, another question about the same area. You were talking about having the landscape buffer at west of the site, beside the Jackson Street. That is nice and could be a good opportunity for residents. I was wondering, when we look at this plan right now, we don't see much. Is there any opportunity, sitting area or animating that area? And that would be inside the gate or more connected to the street, how it would be?
Yeah, there is very much an opportunity. So we have an entire plot of land. How that would get used right now, our primary goal is to use it as a landscaped buffer. And then it could even be used for pets. It could be used just to throw a ball with the children. As far as how far we go with a hardscape, we're not sure because we kind of fell in love with it being green. And as far as, if you want to have a barbecue, a picnic or something, we did provide the space on the 4th floor. So the answer is yes, it's very available to add more hardscape. But we're sort of weighing the pros and cons, and it would be interesting to get a sense of, maybe what the neighborhood would be looking for, but it would be on our lands. But we had provided the hardscape on the 4th level, which we felt allowed us more greenscape on the ground floor.
So just a short question about Main Street and animating along Main Street. I see that you have party room and the gym, but it seems they are not accessible from outside. So all of them accessible from inside and just presentation to out. That's right?
Right now, they're clear storefront. I mean, they're floor to ceiling, clear storefront. There's a possibility you can do that. We didn't do that right now, and it's for security reasons. So we felt adding an additional location for people to come in may or may not be the best approach right now. We were really concentrating on transparency, and we're wide open to ideas there. But again, we're trying to balance that out with a secure environment for the tenants.
Okay, thank you.
Jennifer Mallard.
Hi, my questions have been asked and answered already. Thanks.
Elton.
Hi, just a quick question of clarity. In along the Jackson frontage, there are some rendered perspectives that show the garage door as translucent or transparent, and there are some that show the garage door as kind of black solid. Could you clarify which one is the ultimate outcome?
Yeah, that the rendering only occurs because it actually gets rendered according to time of day.
Okay.
Ideally, so I apologize if there's confusion there. Ideally, it has translucent panels, and that's so that light would glow through. They're not transparent. You're not going to be able to see into this. It would be translucent. It helps in a number of ways. A, it's a lighter door. But B, if there's light on in the garbage area, it would then glow onto the street. So we're looking for that from a safety and comfort point of view. It would not be direct light onto the street. You would just have a glow on the sidewalk. So that was the thinking behind that. It would not be the entire door, likely. You may decide it has a pattern or it's the lower half, but that's the thinking behind it.
Okay, thanks for clarifying. Those are my questions.
I guess I only have one additional question. The drawings indicate that the sidewalk along James or on Main Street is, I guess, 6 meters from your property line, almost to the curb. I'm wondering if there's any information on what's happening within that realm and if there are any street improvements that are being considered here.
There is a 3-meter widening planned for Main Street that will be dedicated to the city. And then we have a setback requirement from that new street line. So then we'll put the planting beds as currently.
It would be helpful to see what the final streetscape conditions are in coordination with what is happening within the applicant property. In any case, I think we're closing up the question and answer stage, and we'll go over to the comments. I think that the first person, I think it's Jennifer Sizo.
Thanks, Dave.
Yes, it's Jennifer Sizo.
So I wanted to say thank you. I'm really pleased to see the emphasis that you put on affordable units and green initiatives. I applaud you for your use of ample bike parking to encourage cycling and transit use. So good job on that. I think you have a really unique challenge and opportunity with your frontage on both sides of the lot on Main and Jackson Street. And while I appreciate the glazing and the effort that you put into locating some of the more active uses on Main Street, I feel like the Jackson Street frontage has been kind of neglected. I'd like to see a little bit more consideration on activating both frontages, particularly with how that's going to interact with the public realm. I didn't see as much detail as I would have liked to in consideration for the development of the street frontages, as well as the amenity area, and in particular 404 Jackson Street, as Hoda alluded to earlier in her question. I really think there's an opportunity there. You mentioned that it's limited to landscape use, so it's somewhere where you could create a larger at-grade amenity area or even a publicly accessible park. I think there's a lot that you could do with the space, and I would like to see a bit more detail there. I did want to mention too, I noticed that the walkways on either side of the main building face, they're not wide enough to be accessible on Main Street. They don't meet the minimum AODA standards of 1.5 meters, so I'd like to see that revisited. And I also think that addressing the Main Street frontage, the facade there, I think the 1.5 meter step back you've shown at the 4th story really isn't deep enough to create a separate mass from the lower floors. The street wall transition from 3 to 2 stories, while I find it interesting, it doesn't quite work for me. I'd rather see a more consistent 3-story street wall with the required step back and inexpensive but high quality architectural detailing and materials that really complement that pedestrian realm. Overall, I did really appreciate your presentation, and I really enjoyed your answer to the question about public art. I would love to see those elements you talked about incorporated, and I hope they don't get lost in an effort to remain affordable. But overall, really good work. Thank you.
I'll turn it over to Yana.
Thank you very much. I agree with a lot of Jennifer's comments. I don't think that the 7th story is too much for this area, but I would strongly suggest to create a much better interface with the neighborhood. As Jennifer already mentioned, along Main Street, it really would help if there was a reasonable step back and much more meaningful podium. And to me as well, the massing as proposed would be somewhat oppressive on Jackson Street, not providing reasonable relationship with the existing small homes. I would suggest that at minimum, the stair B should be relocated about the stair C, not to create additional full heights element projecting toward the neighborhood property. So that could create a better transition. But also the garbage area taking the whole street frontage plus the underground ramp is really, really not the best solution along this residential street. So again, it appears that there is basically no attempt to create a good relationship with its neighbors. And I think you really should revisit that design. The other thing I would like for you to focus on is the proposed materials. The brick seems to be clashing a little bit, in my opinion, with the colorful spandrel panels, and at least from Jackson Street, the brick portion just looks like an addition. Preferably the massing and the materials should be redesigned altogether, in my opinion. And I know you've said that the property at the corner will likely develop, but that blank wall will be very visible for all that time until that time comes for that redevelopment. So again, it should be treated with a more interesting facade from my point of view. That's all for me. Thank you.
Hoda.
Yes. I'd like to thank you for the presentation and also all the effort for designing accessible and affordable housing. That's really a good thing that we need to happen more. And I appreciate all the design and the efforts that you have. Again, I would like to go back about the animating the Main Street side. I believe that having the party room and gym at that area when it's not accessible for public, it's not helping much to animate the area, and probably it's not much preferable. Residents may not prefer to have party when the public is not don't have access, but they can just watch. So I believe that it's better to have some areas that public could have access. Like I know that you said that probably having the retail is not an option, but I believe that could help much more to improving residents' life as well as all the neighborhood, and that could bring more some money to the building too, and also animating the main street side as well. And the pedestrian could benefit walking along and have access to that, although watching just the gym and party room is not enough. And yeah, that's it. Thank you again.
Jennifer Mallon.
Thank you for your presentation. I agree with some of the comments, most of the comments of my colleagues here, but I want to just express my thanks and also understanding that of the tough program juggle that you have in front of you. The planning is incredibly efficient, and it needs to be, of course, because it's affordable housing. The menu of moves that you have in order to achieve things is limited, and I think you've actually done what, as much as you can, which is great. Interesting to hear from planning that this is not necessarily a retail focused zone of Main Street, it's more residential. That one of my concerns, with Hoda and Jennifer, was that there's not enough animation on the Main Street side. But if that's really not a planning emphasis to get retail there, then you've done sort of what you can in order to get activity there. So I realize you're limited. My comments on this are really about design clarity, and I appreciate the fact that you're using a brick that represents, the contextual brick in the neighborhood. I support that, and I appreciate your efforts to put a pop of color in there and some creativity. I think it just needs simplification, and there's almost too many sub moves going on that compromise a quiet, strength to what this building could be. Enforcing the podium in materials, to me, is more important than the depth of the setback. I think you can achieve the massing separation in treating materials rather than making a deeper setback. I agree that the application of the brick just seems to be not wrapped around enough on that T zone at the base. And maybe again, that's a budget thing, your call, but like making that more solid on Main Street would seem like a good move to me. And then I'm wondering if you've considered community gardens and as part of the green space. We've seen some success in other affordable housing projects that even a small plot of herbs or carrots, it's an opportunity for community engagement, and you have that opportunity here with the green spaces. But that's it for me, and thanks for your considered efforts there.
Eldon?
Thanks, David. So I echo a lot of the comments that my fellow panel members have shared. And I do want to commend you on working with, a semi-complicated site to achieve intensification on the property and achieve affordable or attainable housing on that property. So in that regard, I'm really going to focus on just a couple of small items and some that have been shared with some that are a little bit different. The first is on the Main Street facade. I really struggled with, I know that the intent purpose of kind of shifting the proportions of that podium I think to try and match, existing conditions and kind of stepping down from the proposed building. But I really struggled with how that kind of that eastern portion met the ground. It felt like something was off with it. It almost felt like it suggested that only a portion of that building really had an animated frontage, and the other portion was really. It felt like it was more reserved. It was kind of pulling the building down in a way that I struggled with. So, I mean, something to think about, and maybe that step is not necessary, particularly given that property to the east at some point would also redevelop. Um, the the other component was, and I think you discussed the simplified facades along the east and west. I think that's how you describe them. The I appreciate the kind of the use of the panels that kind of mix it up. I think a little more could be done. Perhaps whether it's some clear story slats or other elements that at least kind of create some interest. Because you're going to see components of this, and given the fact that you don't have a zero lot line, you'll always have a bit of a setback. If that's the case, then being able to introduce some small light, but at the same time creating some additional interest along that facade, I think would help to diversify the look, at least in an interim as you're moving, east and west along east along Main Street. I can't move west. But at least, creating that visual interest as well for the pedestrian. And the last point was on the Jackson Street elevation. Um, well, I appreciate, and I heard the discussion about, adding some kind of interest that ties to the downtown with the colors. I felt like the Jackson Street elevation needed to be a little more toned down, given the area context. Maybe those colors are not as appropriate along that facade. Maybe something a little more reserved. That are in keeping perhaps with some of the white clad buildings along the north side of the street. Perhaps that could be integrated into the facade as opposed to the kind of the greens and blue punches, which really make that facade stand out along the modest homes. Those are my comments, and again, I really commend you on your efforts on this proposal.
Thanks, Hilda. I guess just to wrap up, I think I'm not sure I have much more to add. I think that I agree that there's some, on the ground plane, the where you place some of the program components, and also the decision to move one of the public units, the laundry room, up onto the second floor. I think that you may want to re-examine, the placement of some of those components. And perhaps the laundry is a better thing on the street, and the party room is maybe something that might connect over to that landscaped area you have it on the 404 in terms of relationship. I also kind of wonder if there isn't a way to look at the garbage storage area to maybe even have a unit facing onto Jackson on the ground level rather than the garbage, and maybe swap the garbage so that it is part of the the side that faces onto the ramp. Those units that overlook the ramp access are not necessarily entirely desirable, and so I think that there might be a little bit of musical chairs that you could examine in terms of some of this, address some of our ground level concerns that we're raising. I think that the commentary on the Jackson, just the massing that's facing there, and that it's, that's really the issue there in terms of this site as a transition to another area of the city, is the relationship it really strikes to the residential across the street and adjacent. And I just, I just wish that the setback was higher, and I agree with what Eldon was saying about the nature of the texture of it and the color that you have there. It seems a little, I mean, you also commented how you didn't want this building to look like nonprofit housing. And to be honest with you, as soon as I see those bright colors and that kind of vocabulary, it's kind of reads that way to me. So I'm with Jennifer as well, and looking for maybe a more subtler and more elegant composition there that, kind of toned that down a bit. I think the variety and the desire to try and, have some pattern and color on those facades, some of which are blank because of the distance from the property lines and whatnot, I think I think there's something that you're working with. The only other observation I say is that your position along Main Street is right across from another street that basically it presents a facade to the end of that residential street across the. And I'm not sure whether whether there's some inspiration that might have in terms of the composition of the facade that you could maybe celebrate that urban relationship that it's kind of mute at the moment, I'd say, in terms of the composition. And again, I kind of agree that maybe the brick is not as not as used as much as it could. And I mean, a final comment, I mean, you're limited, I guess, because of the zoning. You're just cutting in under the 22 meters or the height, the number of stories. I personally would support a floor higher if it meant that you could step back more aggressively on the Jackson Street side to make a more more comfortable transition down into that residential district, and even maybe with a smaller footprint on that top floor that would create some more amenity, balcony, community space opportunities at the top of the building, that maybe even directly off of the public lobby, because right now that fourth floor balcony terrace area, I mean, you're going down through a bunch of somebody's essentially a little corridor that's private to that floor. It'd be great if you're on that floor, you get lots of views, but for others, I don't know how much access will it. Anyway, I'm just trying to think if there was anything else that I had on my list here. Yeah, I think that in the way the landscaping in general seems not quite as developed as far as the building, even the way the labeling on the top on that balcony is. I mean, there's a zone that's identified as shrubs and furniture. And it's all shrubs, so it's like it hasn't been fully baked. And I think in a way, my sense was on the 404, a site you've got all green right now. And yet when you were talking about it, you were describing it as an amenity for the community. I think that if you can get some relationship between it and the party room and have a spill out patio there, I think it makes a more convincing story to the use of that room. And as I think it was Hoda's talking about how I'd feel pretty uncomfortable having my party on Main Street with a full glass wall beside if I was there. So anyway, I don't really have much more to say, but I also have to commend you for the program approach. It is very dense and little Rubik's Cube that you've got there. I kind of wonder about this need for a stair from the basement and a stair coming down on the Jackson Street, if there wasn't a way to kind of squeeze that a bit more so the same shaft was able to be used going down and up and just create a little more ground floor real estate there as well. So, but that's not really given how careful the rest of it has been done, I'm sure that you examined that, and it's just, there's some challenges to that idea. Anyway. I don't know if you have any questions for us, but otherwise I think we're reaching the end of our time.
No, I appreciate the comments. There's a lot of things that I think we can address as we develop it further. The animation on Main Street, we'll have to really sort of dig down and figure out how to make that possible with the program we have available to us. And also with what is viable for the owner at this point. It's not it's not yet a busy street. So they'll have to consider what they can do and what they could fit into their model. So yeah, we'll definitely consider everything that you've said. And that one's just a little bit a harder one because that's a programmatic issue. As much as I can influence the design, the program is a little bit harder to change. And but we'll definitely put some serious consideration into it.
Best of luck. It's a commendable project, and
Thank you.
we encourage the owners group as well in terms of their service to the community. So, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I think we're done.
That's all. Thanks everyone for coming out this afternoon, and have a good day.
Thank you.